volunteers crossed the Yalu River and fought alongside the Army of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea against the Republic of Korea and the US-led UN forces. A total of 2.9 million CPV soldiers entered the battlefield, 197,653 of whom sacrificed their lives in the war to resist US aggression in Korea.
As 2020 marks the 70th anniversary of the outbreak of Korean War, here are 5 facts you may not know about the conflict. Neither China nor United States officially engaged in the conflict as nation-states.
China sent a volunteer force and the US dominated and led UN forces. On June 27, 1950, 2 days after the war in Korean Peninsula broke out, US President Harry Truman ordered Navy and Air Force to intervene and the US Navy's 7th Fleet into the Taiwan Straits. 3 days later, he approved the use of ground forces on the Korean Peninsula.
The U.S. Constitution states that the Congress should decide when and where the country should go to war.
However, Truman's order was made without congressional approval, and war was never officially declared. Truman later argued a United Nations resolution gave him authority, but he ordered armed forces to the peninsula before the UN acted, and before an agreement with the UN was reached. China sent forces under the banner of volunteers following a request for help from the DPRK and to protect China's national sovereignty, security, and interests. The Chinese government repeatedly cautioned that if US forces crossed the 38th parallel, China would not sit idle. But the US disregarded the warning, seeing it as only diplomatic parlance. After the US-led UN forces landed at Incheon, 160 kilometers south of the 38th parallel, Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai publicly warned on September 13, 1950, that the Chinese people enthusiastically love peace, but in order to defend peace, they never have been and never will be afraid to oppose aggressive war.
On October 1, 1950, DPRK leader Kim Il-sung sent a telegram to Chairman Mao Zedong reporting the grim picture on the battlefield and requesting military aid from China.
Since diplomatic relations between China and the US had not been established, Indian Ambassador Haviland Madhav Panikkar acted as a communication channel between the two camps. On October 2, Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai formally notified Panikkar that if the US crossed the 38th parallel, China would act. In Washington, Secretary of State Dean Acheson dismissed the warning as the mere vaporing of a panicky Panikkar. In a document titled Two Strategic Intelligence Mistakes in Korea 1950, the CIA admitted U.S. intelligence erred. It believed that China, with limited military and economic capability, would not follow through on its warnings.
U.S. forces crossed the 38th parallel on October 7th, and the CPV launched its first battle on October 25th.
Declassified documents from Russia show the Soviet Union was closely involved in the Korean War. In addition to diplomatic and logistical support, the Soviet Union sent air forces to the war from early November 1950. In order to avoid the appearance of direct military clashes with the U.S., Soviet pilots wear CPV uniforms, and their aircrafts carry CPV or DPRK markings. Records from Soviet 64 Fighter Aviation Corps claim that from November 1950 till July 1953, the Soviets shot down 1,309 U.S. planes. The Soviet Union provided the CPV with enormous supplies of weapons, equipment, and ammunition. China's military debt to the Soviet Union reached 3 billion yuan during the war.
Japan, which didn't send troops to the battlefield, was a major economic beneficiary during the Korean War. U.S. troops were stationed in Japan, so military goods were often purchased from Japanese companies. Japan's production increased by nearly 70% by the time the 3-year war ended. In a truth, Japan's gross domestic product had returned to pre-World War II levels.
The Korean Armistice Agreement was signed on July 27, 1953, but a peace treaty is yet to be inked.
So although hostilities ceased in 1953, the war has not formally ended.